So what happens to your SBIR application after you submit it to the NIH? Well, your application goes through a peer review process that consists of several standardized steps so that the reviewers can objectively evaluate your application before a funding decision can be made. And as an NIH SBIR reviewer myself, I'm going to share what happens to your application during this peer review process so that you can be aware of how NIH makes their funding decisions. So make sure you watch until the end of this video so you can position your SBIR application strategically so that you will have the best chances of award. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Stacy Chin from KeepYourEquity.co, and our mission is to help startups and founders secure non-dilutive funding from the federal government so that you can bring your innovative ideas to the commercial market. And we particularly work with a lot of science and tech startups that are looking to secure funding from federal programs called the SBIR and the STTR. If you're interested in learning more about these programs, I'll leave a link to another video in the description below. So you spent months grinding to prepare an SBIR application to the NIH. And after you submit this application, you likely won't hear back until 4 months later to know whether or not the agency wants to award your application. So what is exactly going on within those 4 months? Is the agency just twiddling their thumbs as you wait in anticipation to learn about your results? Or are reviewers just taking their sweet time as they read through your application? Well, not exactly. So right after you hit the submit button, your SBIR application actually goes through a really rigorous and standardized peer review process that's composed of a series of steps that reviewers have to go through in order to figure out whether or not the funding agency wants to award your proposal. And startups should be aware about all the steps within this peer review process because a lot is going on behind the scenes. And if you see my other videos, you'll know that the NIH SBIR program is very competitive so that only a small percentage of applications actually get funded. So if you're an applicant, what can you do? Well, you can better understand the SBIR peer review process so that you can best position your SBIR application for an award. So before we jump into it, why did the NIH adopt this peer review process? Well, there's a couple reasons. First, the peer review process is designed so that reviewers can give feedback on your science and technical merit of your applications objectively. They're responsible for looking at the key personnel, the rigor of your R&D approach, and the adequacy of your resources and facilities to carry out the proposed efforts. And this means that reviewers are looking for innovative technologies and solutions that can solve big problems in this space, backed by their own scientific knowledge and expertise. And this all must be done objectively because the NIH do take conflicts of interest very seriously. Secondly, the peer review process is meant to evaluate the relevancy of your proposed research efforts to the goals of that funding agency. Here, reviewers are evaluating if you were successful in your SBIR efforts, how would that impact the public health? And finally, the peer review process was designed so that reviewers can give thorough feedback to all the applicants whether or not their SBIR application was awarded. Here, the reviewers are supposed to give feedback and comment on the strengths and weaknesses of the significance, the innovation, the investigators, the approach, and the resources and facilities of your SBIR application. So now, since you understand why the NIH adopted this peer review process, let's go over each of the steps that your SBIR application goes through after you hit that submit button. The 5 major steps are the initial administrative review, the scientific review, the advisory council, the funding decision, and the award notification. But before I jump into each of these steps in more detail, if you haven't done so, please like and subscribe to this channel so that you won't miss on any tips and tricks I have to share with you so that you could secure non-dilutive funding for your startup. You can also check out our website at KeepYourEquity.co where you'll find more tips, templates, courses, and other resources to help you in this journey as well. So the first step of the peer review process is the initial administrative review. In this stage, the NIH staff will review your application to make sure it is complete, has all the required documents, and that you meet the eligibility requirements. So for example, they're gonna make sure that all the required documents are in place within your SBIR package. They're also gonna make sure that you submitted the application in time before the deadline, and that your project meets the specific requirements of the NIH SBIR program. If your application does not pass this initial administrative review, it will get rejected and it will not get reviewed. We do not want this to happen. Some examples of this could be that your main technical document exceeded the required page limit, you have made your margins or your font way too small, or you just submitted your application past the deadline. So to avoid this, you want to make sure you read the solicitation carefully or work with a consultant that are familiar with these requirements so that you know exactly how to prepare your SBIR application to avoid failing this administrative review. So once your SBIR application passes the initial administrative review, it goes on to step 2, which is the scientific review. And this is the step where your SBIR application gets picked apart by the experts, which is everyone's favorite step. Here, the scientific review is done by a subject matter experts that sit on a panel called the study section. These are the guys that are responsible for evaluating the scientific and technical merit of your SBIR application. And there's a lot of many steps that goes within the scientific review, which is arguably one of the most important steps within this entire peer review process. First, the NIH staff assigns your application to a particular scientific review group based on the research area and expertise needed to evaluate your application. And there are many different scientific review groups that specializes in many different sectors of health, like cancer, therapeutics, surgical devices, Alzheimer's, and so much more. If you're interested to learn more about what types of scientific review groups there are within the NIH for the SBIR program, I'll leave a link in the description below. So once your SBIR application finds a home, you'll likely get assigned 3 reviewers, sometimes 4. Usually the first reviewer is the expert in your space, and the other 2 or 3 reviewers have other complementary skill sets that can evaluate other aspects of your application. Independently, each reviewer is responsible for reading through your application and evaluating the significance, the innovation, the investigators, the approach, and the environment of your SBIR application. And to rate each of those categories, they're going to give you a number from 1 to 9, with 1 being the best thing since sliced bread, and 9 being the worst thing they've ever seen. If you'd like me to do another video that goes into each of these categories in much more detail, leave a comment below. So after each reviewer does their own independent evaluation, all the reviewers within that study section comes together to sit on the study panel. And this can be done either virtually through Zoom or in person. And here in this panel, which usually takes 1 to 2 days, the reviewers will discuss as a group the applicants that scored within the top 50 percentile. And during this discussion, the panel will discuss the strengths and weaknesses each of the reviewers found, which may also lead to additional information required or recommendations for further improvements. So after the scientific review is complete, your SBIR application proceeds and gets sent to the NIH Center or Institute to make a funding decision. Here, your application now goes under review by the Advisory Council. The council is responsible for reviewing the feedback from the study sections and then making a decision whether or not your SBIR application is aligned to the goals of that NIH Center or Institute. The council is also responsible for balancing the research portfolio within that NIH Institute or Center. And the council is also responsible for helping the director of the NIH Institute or Center to make a funding decision based on the amount of funds available, the relevancy of the goals to that institute or center, and based on the scientific merit of the applications. So collectively, the feedback from the study section and from the council are all going to be considered by the funding agency when they make their final funding decisions. So next, a funding decision will be made. If you're one of the lucky ones and the agency is considering to fund your application, you might have to go through a due diligence process called the just-in-time or the JIT. And in the JIT process, you might be required to submit additional information or to answer questions to certain aspects of your application. If you get a JIT request, this is a great sign, but however, you still want to take the step really seriously because this is the home stretch, but you're not there just yet. So after you go through the JIT process, and if the NIH funding agency wants to award your SBIR application, you will get the Notice of Award, or NOA. And this Notice of Award outlines all the terms and conditions of this funding that they're going to give you, including the amount of funding, the duration of the award, and any reporting requirements. But once you receive the NOA, that's when you can celebrate and realize that your SBIR application just got funded. So with that, those are the 5 steps that your SBIR application goes through after you hit the submit button. And if you found these tips helpful, please like and comment below and let me know if you have any other questions about the SBIR and STTR program. And with that, thank you so much for watching until the end of this video. Don't forget to check out our website at keepyourequity.co, where you'll find more resources and templates and tricks to help you secure non-dilutive funding. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll see you in a video very soon.